Hey guys, what's cracking? It's Krakenation. Today we are bringing you guys the next installment of the How to Fix It series that we've been launching to kind of get hyped for Gen 4. If you haven't watched the Infernape video or the previous videos, definitely go check those out. But so what we're doing is we're taking a look at Pokemon from Generation 4 with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl coming out. We're taking a look at these Pokemon and seeing what do we think Game Freak could potentially do to make them more competitively viable, kind of buffs, if you will. A lot of times when new generations or new games roll around, these Pokemon in those games receive new moves that they didn't have before, and they can make a pretty big change to those Pokemon's viability. Sort of doing a little bit of a theoretical, theory modding, if you want to call it that, for what these Pokemon could potentially get that would make the quickest and most dramatic impact to their competitive viability. And so today we're going to be taking a look at Empoleon. Empoleon is the final evolution of Piplup if you choose that as your starter in the game. Empoleon is my personal favorite of these three. As far as I always pick the water type starter. I always like the water type. It's one of my favorite types in the game. Maybe is my favorite type. So I'm big on the water type, but I think Empoleon is also really cool. It's got a great design. Always really liked it. So yeah, it's a water steel type. Pretty great typing actually. Pretty unique. Leaves it with a few weaknesses and a few neutral kind of hits that are key, and we're going to be talking about later. But water steel, obviously water and steel are both independently great typings, and together they're pretty good as well. So let's take a look at what Empoleon's biggest weaknesses are. So first up, opposing wall breakers tend to be able to overwhelm Empoleon pretty easily. It is kind of a mix between an offensive and defensive mon. More than a wall, Empoleon functions as more of a tank in most battles, especially because it doesn't have recovery. It ends up having to be in this niche where it kind of comes in, tanks some hits, potentially dishes out good damage with things like Scald, Ice Beam, or Flash Cannon, and then kind of takes hits and does utility things. So it's cool because it's got Roar, it's got Stealth Rock, it's got Defog, it's even got Priority and Aqua Jet, so it's got a lot of utility functions, but it also primarily is able to sponge some hits. And it kind of operates in the weird space where its bulk's good, but not terrific, and it has to rely on its typing a little bit for that, especially the steel typing, obviously. Its offenses are okay, passable, definitely nothing to write home about unless you're, I guess, running like Specs Empoleon for whatever reason. For that reason, opposing wall breakers tend to be able to overwhelm Empoleon fairly quickly, and kind of in the same vein, just super effective attacks in general, especially those electric and ground type attacks, because Empoleon is going to be your water type on a lot of teams. You're going to want it to be able to beat potentially opposing ground types, but it's going to struggle to switch into those ground types, especially if you're trying to use it as a bulky water. Switching into ground types is pretty freaking tough when you're a steel type. So super effective attacks just in general tend to overwhelm Empoleon pretty quickly, but you're just going to want to be careful of those. Furthermore, special walls, because Empoleon, again, like I said, is good, not great on the offensive side. Things like Blissey, Chansey, just those, textbook special tanks just tend to be able to eat hits for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and Empoleon doesn't really have a good way to boost its offensive capabilities, so it can't really lean to that strength too much. It's not really a strength at all, and that's the problem. So kind of relies on things like Toxic to beat those Pokemon, and as you know, Toxic is not usually an effective way to beat Chansey or Blissey or anything like that, so those tend to be a pretty big issue for it. Finally, chip damage just tends to be another big deal for Empoleon. Its only form of recovery is passive and leftovers, so as you can there's probably kind of a theme here you notice where it tends to get overwhelmed by offensive output pretty quickly because it doesn't have recovery and its bulk isn't that spectacular on either side. It's good, especially on the specially defensive side, it's pretty good, but it's not amazing. So things like chip damage, things like Stealth Rock spikes, even though it resists Stealth Rocks, eventually these things kind of wear on it. If it's coming in and taking even resisted hits, eventually these things wear it down. So if you, let's say, have to at some point in the game eat a powerful Fire Blast, because it is your water type and it is unfortunately neutral to fire, you have to eat the powerful Fire Blast, maybe just 40 or 50 to you, and then later on in the game, you take a few resisted like U-turns or something like that. All of a sudden, your Empoleon might be looking like something got 30 or 40% health left, and it's ripe for the picking with a clean sweeper or a KO. So you're gonna want to be careful about chip damage as well. So how can we go about fixing this? And I think there is an obvious, absolutely easy, textbook, slam dunk way to solve most Empoleon's problems as a defensive Pokemon especially, and that is obviously Roost. Empoleon is a bird, and now some people are going to make the argument, oh, Empoleon doesn't fly, how can it roost? Dodrio doesn't fly, Mantine doesn't fly. There's a lot of Pokemon in this game that don't fly, that for whatever reason get roost. Like Mew, I guess, gets everything, but Mew gets it. Like, there's a lot of Pokemon that don't fly. Like, Dodrio is my textbook case. It's based on an ostrich. Yeah, those don't fly either, and those can roost. So Empoleon, yeah, it's a penguin, doesn't technically, fly and then land, but it could definitely still roost. It's a bird. I don't want to hear it. So as you may or may not know, roost is a recovery move that allows you to restore 50% health. If you are flying Pokemon, it also grounds you. So let's say, for example, Skarmory is immune to ground type attacks normally, but after Skarmory clicks roost, it is now weak to ground type attacks because it loses its flying typing for a turn. So Empoleon is going to be able to use Roost to recover 50% health and finally recover off the damage from the various attacks it's asked to sponge throughout the battle. Roost is really helpful in that regard. It gives it resistance to being worn down throughout the fight. I think this alone kind of, if you looked at the things that I talked about with weaknesses, this gives Empoleon such an amazing tool to recover off damage that it's asked to absorb through the fight. Just gives it so much more longevity and just turns it into more, instead of a tank, now it can be a special wall that doesn't give up offensive pressure completely. So you could run like a Roost, Scald, Ice Beam, Stealth Rock set, or maybe you run Defog on there somewhere, you know, where you become a really good special wall that can just spam things like Scald or Knock Off. It gets a lot of cool moves that it unfortunately doesn't have space for, or doesn't have the time to use because it's getting worn down so quickly. It needs to focus on one specific role. Now it allows to blanket check a lot more Pokemon because it can recover damage without worrying too much about it. This really would be absolutely crucial to making Empoleon a more competitively viable Pokemon. I think this would single-handedly boost it so much. That Water Steel typing is obviously pretty good defensively. This just takes it to a whole nother level, and I feel like it makes sense, you know? It's a bird, dude. Like, it can just give it Roost. Holy crap, why doesn't it get it already? So, I definitely think this is the most likely on this list, but also, you know, has a good chance of, I'm hoping, making a big difference if it were to happen. Next up, I want to talk about Flip Turn, which is a move that was recently introduced in Generation 8 that a lot of Pokemon got. Flip Turn is a 60 base power accuracy, 100% accuracy, physical water move, but most importantly, it operates like U-Turn and Volt Switch, where after you click it, you are able to switch out into another Pokemon. It's an amazing move. All these pivoting moves are so important in competitive Pokemon because they allow you to grab momentum throughout the match. You know, let's say your opponent switches something in, well, you can make a prediction and click the Flip Turn and switch out to grab pressure. Alternatively, let's say your opponent brings in the defensive Pokemon and to wall your attack. The next turn you can click that Flip Turn, that U-Turn, whatever it is, switch back and bring back in the next offensive threat and keep the game going. Just allows you to grab momentum so effectively. And Flip Turn would be absolutely massive. So many Pokemon got it in this generation. I think Empoleon is another one that if it were to get it would be such a huge beneficiary of Flip Turn. I think this is another one that's really likely, actually, because Empoleon has a good chance of now, you know, getting these extra moves. I think this one's one that we could definitely see in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. And finally, these kinds of pivot moves are really easy to spam against a wide variety of teams, especially defensive ones, because Empoleon, you know, like I talked about earlier, really struggles when like special walls come into it. So something like a Chansey or a Blissey is the first thing that comes to mind. Now you can click that Flip Turn. It's honestly not even that weak of an attack. Probably gonna do like 15-20% at least to one of those Pokemon because it's a physical stab water move. And Empoleon's physical attack stat is not absolute trash. So you click that Flip Turn, you get out of there, and maybe you bring in your fighting type or your powerful physical wall breaker next, and you're able to just keep the pressure on. So this makes it really valuable on a balanced team. If you could run both Flip Turn and Roost on Empoleon, it would make it such a good fit on most balanced teams, because now it can function as a special wall that doesn't give up offensive pressure. That's a really cool role to be able to fulfill on those teams. And you know, you can run things like Roost, Flip Turn, Stealth Rock, and then like, I don't know, Toxic or Defog or Ice Beam, or, you know, you just Scald if you wanted. You know, the options are all there. And so this would be another move that I think would make a huge difference to Empoleon's competitive viability. Finally, the last one I want to talk about is actually a different vein we're going to go down. Instead of a move, I want to introduce the idea of maybe we change Empoleon's hidden ability from the Defiant, which is cool but kind of useless because Empoleon, basically the only time Defiant gets activated in competitive Pokemon is either through use of Intimidate or Defog by your opponent. And Empoleon has a decent physical move pool, and its physical attack stat isn't trash, but to be able to actually make use of Defiant, you have to be dedicated to your physical attack, and then by the very nature of Defiant, it's not a very reliable thing to pull off. You don't want to ever be banking on Defiant being activated. And if you have a Defiant Empoleon that's physically offensive, and you like don't have Defiant ever get activated throughout the match, that you just have brought a really suboptimal Pokemon on your team. So I want to propose that we potentially change the ability we're looking at. And I think Thick Fat would make sense on a Pokemon like Empoleon. You know, it's a kind of cold weather Pokemon. A lot of these other cold weather Pokemon get Thick Fat. And what Thick Fat does, if you aren't aware, is it reduces the damage of fire and ice type moves by half. Now, in Empoleon's case, that's unique and really helpful for one specific reason. It turns that because water resists fire, but Steel is weak to fire, Empoleon is neutral to fire. And it turns that neutrality to fire back to a resistance to fire, functionally. And that's huge, because if you're drafting, maybe you're in a draft league and you're picking up Empoleon as your water type, or you're building a competitive Pokemon team and Empoleon's your water type, you're going to have a really big problem when your water type isn't able to resist a very common and very good offensive typing in fire. So when Empoleon gains Thick Fat, it would be able to finally switch into those fire type attacks, and then hopefully maybe roost it off, you know, maybe grab some momentum on the flip turn. You know, we've got some options here, but now it can finally be the true bulky water that it has always wanted to be, and kind of followed short of because it has that neutral hit. It's hit neutrally by fire. And finally, I mean, ice type moves, LOL. It was already 4 times resistant, but I guess if you want to take 1% instead of 2% from your average ice beam, like, go ahead, and you're now 8 times resistant. That's pretty cool. So yeah, that's definitely, I think, in vein they could take it in, is that Defiant ability is just not very useful, and Thick Fat could be a lot better. But guys, let me know what you guys thought of this video. Are you excited to use Empoleon? I know when I play Brilliant Diamond or Shining Pearl, depending on which I get, Empoleon will always be my starter of choice. I love this Pokemon. It's been one of my favorites since I was a kid. And I'm really excited to try it. I'm hoping some of these changes get made. What changes do you guys think? If you want to drop it in the comment section below, let me know what you guys think of my potential suggestions, or maybe if you have some cool ideas. I thought on the Infernape video, we had a lot of really great ideas of people suggesting. I was like, oh, that's interesting. You know, somebody suggested Drought. That was a cool idea. But there's a lot of cool ideas out there, and you know, I can't think of them all. So definitely let me know what you guys think about these Empoleon changes, what changes you would make if you were working at Nintendo, and what Pokemon you want to see next afterwards. Make sure to comment, leave a rate, subscribe, all that good stuff, guys. It's always very appreciated. I'm so excited to bring you guys videos back. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Krakenation out.